Hello and welcome to Afternoon Tea with Karen. Today's subject is on the board.
Regardless of your background, where you're from, what you believe, or who you love, every Victorian deserves to live a life free from hate. But we know that for many people, that's not always the case. 18 years ago, Victoria introduced the Racial and Religious Tolerance Act to protect people from vilification. Vilification can include things like trolling, online abuse, physical threats, violence, and severe ridicule. But this law is complex and it's narrow and it's not equipped to deal with the world we find ourselves in today. A world where more hate and harm is spread through online and social media than ever before. The Victorian Parliament is looking at the effectiveness of anti-vilification laws, and we're recommending that the laws be expanded to protect LGBTIQ people, women, and people with disabilities, as well as the current protections offered to people with religious beliefs and from different racial backgrounds. We're also recommending changes to the way in which we determine whether vilification has occurred, looking at the harm that's impacted individuals and their communities, rather than focusing on a complex and difficult to prove incitement test, which doesn't really capture the type of hate that people experience. What is critically important is that the law reflects community expectations. What's also important is that we get the balance right between freedom of expression and protecting people from hate and discrimination. We also know that a law like this is only effective when it can be properly enforced. We've recommended that the criminal law be simplified to deal with incidences of hate. We've also recommended that the Commission's powers for resolving disputes and looking into systemic issues of vilification are strengthened. And we also know that the public need to understand better about what protections are out there. What does vilification look like? How can you prevent it? How can you respond to it? We live in one of the most diverse communities, and it's important that everyone in that community can live their lives without hate and free from vilification.
And that was from 2020. Here we have the supporting document. In February this year, the Victorian Equal Opportunities and Human Rights Commission made a submission to the parliamentary inquiry into Victoria's anti-vilification protections. So this goes with strengthening Victoria's laws against hate speech or conduct. We called for reforms to the Racial and Religious Tolerance Act. The Commission has regulated the RRTA since its inception, and we know the Act is not working effectively to prevent or respond to hate conduct. One of the factors that has made it so difficult for people to run successful vilification cases is the high legal threshold people must meet to show vilification has occurred. We recommend the thresholds in the RRTA civil test in sections 7 and 8 be changed from prohibiting conduct that incites hate or strong feelings to conduct that expresses or is reasonably likely to incite hate or strong feelings. A major problem with the current incitement test is that it requires consideration of the impact on a witness to hate conduct, not on the victim who experiences the harm. We believe this is the wrong focus. While it is appropriate that criminal offences should only apply to the most serious conduct, the current test is too high. Tests should be simplified and revised to prohibit intentional or reckless hate conduct, and it should prohibit threats to harm or incitement rather than requiring both to be unlawful. The serious vilification offences also need to be incorporated into the Crimes Act. This would improve visibility of hate as a crime and strengthen Victorian police enforcement. Moving the offences to the Crimes Act would make it clear to police that serious vilification is a crime. Part of the reforms, consideration should also be given to making it a crime to publicly display symbols, images, and materials that are designed to incite hate or spread hate. This can include, but should not be limited to, Nazi symbols. We recommend expanding the scope of anti-vilification protections to include sexual orientation, gender identity, sex characteristics, gender, disability, and personal association. This would acknowledge the profound harm resulting from all these forms of hate, as well as providing more effective redress for people who experience high rates of compounding intersectionality forms of hate. It is recommended that protections in the RRTA be incorporated into the Equal Opportunity Act, including vilification protections in the EOA would support better awareness and use of hate laws in Victoria and would ensure a consistent approach to preventing and responding to discrimination, sexual harassment and vilification. In order for these reforms to be effective, we must strengthen the Commission's role. First reform, create a positive obligation on employers and others to try to prevent hate before it occurs. I've done a bit on positive obligation. Anyway, the Commission could enforce the positive duty through an investigations function, again similar to the ones provided in the EOA. To ensure this function is effective, the Commission's powers following an investigation should be reinstated to enable the Commission to issue compliance notices and enter into enforceable undertakings. Commission needs stronger powers to receive and resolve complaints of vilification, particularly in the age of anonymous online abuse. If we had the power to direct Facebook to provide us with email addresses for the owner of the page, we could accept the complaint and offer dispute resolution. Oh, sorry, I missed. With appropriate powers, the Commission could compel the provision of documents to help identify potential perpetrators who hide behind online anonymity and engage them in our voluntary dispute resolution process. And law reform should enable representative complaints without naming individual complainants. Supporting reforms to Victorians' anti-vilification protections with education and a public awareness campaign is vital for people to understand what hate is, its impacts, and what protections and pathways are available to seek redress. That began earlier this year in Victoria. The Unsaid Says a Lot campaign. Trans women belong in women's sports. And if all this goes through, it's going to be law. If you've got an issue with it, you're the problem. So, tailored training will also be critical for Victorian police members, and they now have their own liaison officers and things for the rainbow people. Yep, and there's that. To 2024 and how things are now. Trevor's taxi driver demands payment up front. Now, I get taxis. I've never been in an Uber, and where I live, overnight, you have to pay up front. So says the sticker on the glove box. I've never actually got an overnight taxi, but anyway, back to Trevor. Trevor, an Aboriginal man, booked a taxi to go shopping, and when the taxi stopped and saw him, the driver started to drive off. Trevor waved him down the taxi and asked why he was driving off. The taxi driver responded he would only take him if he paid the fare up front. How does the law apply to Trevor's situation? Well, under the Victoria's Equal Opportunity Act, it is against the law to discriminate against someone because of their race. Providers of goods and services, including transport services, have a positive duty to eliminate discrimination as far as possible. Trevor could make a complaint of race discrimination against the taxi driver and service. If Trevor decides to make a complaint to the Commission, he could ask for outcomes that are important to him and his community. They could be telling his story and being heard, an acknowledgement of his experience, an apology made to him or within the community, being given back his job, a statement of service or reference, a promise to change or stop behaviour, financial compensation, cultural awareness training for the taxi driver and services, new or updated equal opportunity policies for the taxi service, and the taxi service talking publicly on social media, for example, about their commitment to ensuring the service is free from discrimination. So we got the sorry, just back here in order, for these three reforms to be effective. So the first one, positive obligation. Tick.
Yeah, okay, check this out.
A local transgender woman suing the Hooters franchise on Wolf Road for discrimination. News 10's James De La Fuente has been following the story and begins our coverage tonight.
The Hooters on Wolf Road drawing protesters twice in recent weeks.
Justice for Brandy, justice for all. Everybody has justice.
Pause the video, pause it. This has got to be immediate family members. Ain't nobody out there protesting for this. Ain't nobody protesting.
That's got to be her neighbors or family.
Man, that's got to be her mom. I mean, his mama. Dad. Ain't nobody protesting for that. Keep this going.
Hooters for sex-based discrimination.
This is crazy.
On the basis of accommodations and on the basis of employment.
The restaurant has been a regular stop for Brandy Livingston, so much so she hoped to someday work there. However, after her recent transition, Brandy claims that she's not respected there as a woman.
They would use male pronouns. They would refer to me as he.
She claims it goes even further, telling me employees and management at the restaurant continually harass her when using the public restroom.
I overheard one of the servers after I left the restroom talking to one of the managers and said that, why are you allowing him in the women's restroom? And the manager said, oh, I don't like it any more than you do.
Brandy filed a claim with the New York State Division of Human Rights, and after investigating, they found sufficient evidence her rights may have been violated under New York Executive Law 296, and there will be a hearing.
At-will situation, proving that the employer's reason they gave was wrong is not enough. You got to prove that it was discrimination on the basis of some prohibited characteristics, such as, gender identity.
She says she applied 3 times for employment.
I said, do you want to see my experience or anything? Because I had previous jobs I've had written down.
Yeah, let me see your experience.
He said, well, we don't care about experience. We hire on the basis of personality, and there's an image that needs to be met.
Hooters has fired back, saying through their lawyers that Brandy was requested to not return to the restaurant because of what they say were her own offensive actions, and allege that Brandy on several occasions made sexually explicit comments to servers.
They just claimed that you had, prior to transitioning and after, you had frequently made multiple servers at the restaurant uncomfortable by informing them you wanted to marry them, discussing masturbation.
I never said any of that.
The Hooters company says that you had threatened to go to a gun range for practice for the next time you came to the restaurant.
My mom would take me to the gun range and for clay pigeon shooting trap. I feel like one of the servers might have overheard what me and my dad were talking about and misunderstood what we were talking about.
I have reached out to local law enforcement to check any claims of possible gun violence and have found no such threat. Ultimately, Brandy says she does not want money.
What I really want is an apology. I'm never going to get that.
Lawyers for Hooters have not responded to repeated requests for comment. Brandy and Hooters head to a human rights hearing in September of 2025.
It's a very slow system. I think that's why more people don't stand up for their rights.
Reporting in the Capital Region, James De La Fuente, News 10, ABC.
Slogan, alphabet women or women is, don't you think it's missing context? You can't just say things like that. Yeah. Because it's not true.
See you later. Bye.